Today we have Sarah Cunningham, Product Manager for InfraWorks, as well as Ramesh Sridharan and Austin Jeffson, giving us an overview of what's next in InfraWorks in the coming release. So this webcast series, if you don't know already, we run it twice per month. Typically this is the first and third Wednesday of the month. Our goals here is to inform you about the civil product features from the perspective of the product team, give you a chance to ask questions and provide feedback, and bring our users and makers closer together into the civil infrastructure community. Our next webcast, which is Wednesday, July 12th, will focus on feature extraction from reality capture in InfraWorks. The presenter will be Ramesh Sridharan, who is on the line today to also give us an update about these features. We will just have an hour-long, more specialized deep dive on this on the 12th. You can watch for registration announcements and the link to register for this upcoming session on our community site, our forum, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, most of the social media bases we cover. So if you have any ideas right now about what you'd like to see covered in upcoming topics of these product team webcasts, please go ahead and open your questions panel in your GoToWebinar sidebar and type in some ideas for future topics that you want to learn more about and you'd like to see the product team speak to. Feel free to enter those comments into the questions panel anytime during this session. So at this point, I am going to run 3 quick polls with the audience, so please take a moment and vote on these polls. They'll be about 30 seconds each. And then we will turn over the presentation to our presenters. So this first poll you should be able to see is just asking you about your current usage level with InfraWorks, so we get a sense of who's tuning in and where you are all at with the application. I'm going to give you another 15 or 20 seconds to vote before I close this out. All right, closing this first poll in another 3 or 4 seconds. Great. So I'll just share the results there with you. You can see 12% of our attendees don't have it installed. 20% have installed the product and played with it a few times, so more of the beginner level. 24% have dabbled, so more of a perhaps novice intermediate level. 35% are at a regular use level with InfraWorks on some projects. 8% use InfraWorks on almost every project. Great to see. Thanks for answering this first poll. I'm going to move a little bit more quickly in these next 2 polls. The second one is asking you, what type of work do you like to do with InfraWorks, or do you work with? If there's an option here you're not seeing, feel free to type that into the questions panel for giving us a little bit more detail. All right, I'm going to close this poll out in a couple more seconds, so try and get an answer in if you haven't voted already. Great, thanks. I'm sharing the results now. You should see that about 41% of attendees site design. So this is a multiple answer option. This won't add up to 100. Another 42% are using InfraWorks for road design. Another 42% for GIS data compilation. 25% for residential design, and 68% for visualizing projects. A couple other type-in answers we got were bridge design, site logistics, site analysis, site modeling, and that's great. Okay, so on to the last poll. This is asking you the most significant barrier or obstacle to adoption of InfraWorks. And we consider this full InfraWorks adoption. All right, I'll close this poll out in another 5 or 6 seconds. So go ahead and put an answer in. All right, so here you can see I'm sharing the results. Some of the barriers we're seeing here, 6% are the cost of the software, 25% are saying that there's a lack in product functionality, 36% find it unclear how to incorporate InfraWorks into some of their workflows. 16% says Civil 3D does what we needed to do. And another 17% find training and implementation costs to be an obstacle. So thanks for taking the time to answer these polls. This is great feedback and really information that we can use moving forward. So I'm going to hide this last poll. If I didn't mention this already, my name is Elliot Rosenfeld. I work on learning content for InfraWorks. I'm filling in for Eric Chappelle. He'll be back in 2 weeks. And thanks for doing those polls. I'm going to turn it over to Ramesh. So let me confirm that I can see your screen, Ramesh.
Perfect. Thanks, Elliot.
Yep, I can see your screen. Awesome.
Perfect, thank you. Let me just start the slideshow. Perfect, guys. So we have quite a few stuff we added in 18.2, 18.1 release, it's coming up. And I'm going to talk about the reality capture enhancements we added. So as we know, the reality capture is the best way to get the existing conditions. And existing conditions can mean different things to different people, but when it comes to design, it mostly means one thing, that's extracting break line information from the point cloud data. So that's a feature, one of the core feature we added in 18.1 upcoming release in InfraWorks. So now user can bring in the point cloud data and extract linear strings, and the point cloud can be any type of point cloud, static or mobile or even a high density airborne, and drones as well. You can bring those point clouds, you can extract them. And when we talk about the linear strings, the design and the accuracy, we cannot skip out the cross section or section view of the point cloud data. So we added those capabilities as well. And of course, once you create them, there has to be a better way to export or take it to Civil 3D to complete your design process. So we added that export options as well. So let me jump into the product real quick to show you the tools. This is the typical mobile LiDAR data. It's not too dense, but dense enough to see the point cloud. And I picked this specifically because when you see that, you can actually see some of the features are not that visible for the human eye, but the tool we already have, the point cloud terrain, actually does a good job on bringing them out. If I just switch it on, you can actually see the paint stripes, the edge of payment, everything was classified in this particular case and kept as a very important features right there. So now the extraction of the linear features, we made it really simple. So there's a button called linear feature extraction. You click that, there's two options. One is a good old manual stuff, click and double click, you can create a 3D polyline, but I want to show you the automatic. So you click the automatic and you have ability to choose different line styles or what feature you're trying to extract. In this case, I'm going to extract, let's say, edge of payment. Click the edge of payment, OK, and tell the software what are you trying to extract. In this case, this is a line I want to see. So software just gets the information of the feature code in the form of line style right here, and also what line you're trying to extract. Then it completes your thought process. It basically parses the whole point cloud data and identifies all the points that matter for this line, and it creates a 3D polyline. Before I zoom out and show you, let me just create one more. Click linear features, same thing, automatic, and in this case I'm going to choose the quick select, in this the paint stripe, and this and this. So basically just get the information, basic information from the user, and then software does the heavy lifting to get the 3D linear strings right here. And the vertex, the clicking, the 2 clicks you're making, it's better to be as accurate as possible. But if you're a little bit off, you don't have to worry about it. The software does most of the job getting it good. So here, let me zoom out. You can actually see it's a relatively big data. Let me zoom out even further. But software did a good job on creating a 3D polyline. When I zoom in all the way on the other end, you can actually see this is the paint stripe. This is the edge of payment line we created as a 3D line. So software does extraction much easier. And just to show you the manual part, very simple, just you can actually click, and the usual double click, you can now create the 3D polylines also. We also added some of the basic the line editing functionalities. Like for example, if this is the line, I want to split them, you can just click and split. Now the software makes it two different lines, and you may change your decision, you want to now merge them, you can just bring it together. Now it makes it a one solid line. So we added splitting, removing vertex and adding a vertex, all those capabilities to make sure you can actually create a good 3D polylines from the point cloud data. So once you have that, obviously user want to check the lines extracted in the section view, but most importantly, user want to extract the break lines. So let me just dive in somewhere like top and bottom of the curve. I'm going to select a line for an alignment, right click and say show cross section view. Now the software jumps into the section view. A lot of options available. You can actually exaggerate the section view any ways you want. There are point cloud themes available to suit the user's need and how you want to see it. There are options to how much a section you want it to jump, the thickness and the width to show, all those good stuff. So here, let's just try to extract top of the barrier here and bottom. So just click them. Now you got the vertex. Now I go every 5 meters in this case. Now I can extract a 3D polyline of the top and bottom of the barrier. And it's a real-time feedback. You can actually see the canvas keeps moving and the line keeps updating, and updating the vertex is really simple. Just click and drag. You can mouse wheel zoom in to see where exactly you want to position to make sure everything you extract is as accurate as possible. And software does a good job on maintaining the view irrespective of how the point cloud might go up and down depending upon the road, the elevation changes. Software maintains the view to ease the extraction process right there. And same thing, when you're doing this, if you want to edit some other vertex, like for example here, this you want it to be changed, just click and drag and software creates the edited line polylines. So cross-section makes the QA/QC job of extracted line work by automation, and also let user extract additional lines as needed. So make sure that all the accurate line extraction comes into picture. And this kind of solves most of the user's problem. Now you can extract the break lines, you can take it to Civil 3D, interpolate them, you can create a 3D surface. There goes your very good 3D design with the Civil 3D. You can get the job done. We want to add a little bit more functionalities like augment the break lines with additional details in case if user wants to do it. The one way of doing that is we added a tool called transverse lines. For example, now we have just a break line. Imagine how every so often I have the horizontal or perpendicular line that gives you more surface details if you want to use. That's exactly what this does. Let me close this. Come here, any alignment you choose, generate transverse line. There are simple but effective options available, how often you want and how you want to drape it to the point cloud, all those stuff. But the bottom line is when you press OK, software for the whole corridor or this whole alignment for that matter, it creates a transverse line as a 3D polyline tool. That can be exported also. I'll come to that in just a second. So now you're not only extracting the break lines, now you can augment that with the more details like this. Let me switch off the point cloud so that you can take a look at the transverse line. It's for the complete corridor, obviously. And that's one way of augmenting your surface. The other way is we added the export option. When I click here, the first option is ground grid points only. For those who use the point cloud terrain functionality, which we have in the product for quite some time, this actually classifies the point cloud data and extracts a barrier terrain. Now you can actually export them as a, you had the export option even before. Now I made it simpler where extracting the ground grid points as a separate entity. And of course, the linear features, you can extract them with the feature codes and all the attributes available here. And the transverse line as a separate option, so users can choose to use it or not use it depending upon the purpose. It can also be exported. And the vertical features or the extopo features for design, or it could be called as a city assets or city furnitures, that can also be exported very easily as a 3D point shapefile. That feature is already there. We've been using this for quite some time. We'll cover that in the next seminar. But in this one, the linear feature is the main what's new in InfraWorks. And the most important part, the target coordinate system. Just because you work on some coordinate system in InfraWorks and doesn't mean you have to live with it. If your civil 3D drawings are a different coordinate system, user can easily change whatever the coordinate system they want and press start export, and it exports into a desired coordinate system. So now everything you extract here will fall right exactly where it should on the civil 3D drawing. So, but this way now, once you get the point cloud data, you can perform the terrain generation, you can extract the extop over point features. Now you can extract all the 3D polylines, automatic or manual, and export them to civil 3D. Covers as a complete design workflow for the existing conditions for design. And that's what we are mainly releasing in this one. I think that's what I want to cover. Any questions?
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that, Ramesh. So there are a couple questions. So the first one that came in is, can linear extraction be used to extract the top, back, bottom of a straight or curved retaining wall?
Absolutely. So there are some automated options available, like let me just switch on the point cloud data. So it depends. If I say automatic, you can actually choose here, like I choose top of curve or the bottom of curve because it's specifically designed to look for the top kind of a feature and bottom kind of feature. But as always, you can always go into the cross-section mode and you can extract top and back and everything of the walls also. Very easy.
Awesome. Another question that came in was just asking about the accuracy of the extracted features. Do you know the type of location accuracy for the features and if there are any limiting factors?
Definitely. So the automated algorithm tries to put exactly in the center. Like you can actually see here, I can change the different theme, but that might, there you go, not that bad. It's a little odd to see, but you can actually see that's a paint stripe where it's supposed to be, and the lines are put exactly, I try to put exactly in the center as much as the point cloud is available. So it makes sure the positional as well as the elevation accuracy is as close as possible. And when it comes to cross-section, it actually shows everything to the user. So user can actually guide the vertex where it wants to be to make it more accurate. So either way, you will get accurate quality lines out of the product.
Great. So another question, when you're working in the section editor for the feature extraction, is there any type of automation or for the bottom and top of the line work, or is this solely a manual process?
We do actually. So we added some capabilities where we call it a vertex prediction. So we had some basic functionality where when you go from one section to other, software try to pick a best possible vertex for you. But we will plan to make it better and better. But it's automation where users don't have to edit so much in the cross-section view, but come across as just a QA/QC person to make sure it is accurate. So there are some automation going on in cross-section also.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to ask you two more quick questions, and then we will move on to some other sections. One question is, will we get the option to bring in raw LAS files?
That is in the pipeline actually. So right now we are using the RCS file that comes through the recap. We had some requests from the users on opening the LAS file also. That's in our pipeline.
Great. Okay, another good question. Does break line generation depend on point cloud identification? Can it generate break lines if the point cloud has no identification?
When you mean identification, I'm not sure they mean by the intensity values in the data or the classification. I can answer both. The user have to run the terrain generation right now to use the linear feature, but terrain generation is an automated process. User don't have to do much to it. When it comes to intensity markings, the automation does look for the intensity markings. So it needs some kind of information to do it, especially for the paint stripes and the edge of payments. But the automation for the top and bottom of the curves on our cross sections, it doesn't expect anything else except XYZ value. So even without any markings or any indication, you can still use cross-section viewer to extract what you want.
Awesome. Okay. Final question. This was to clarify about a previous question on accuracy. Are there any limitations of importing point clouds covering a large area? And does every point come in the exact location it was collected?
Yes. It will. As far as the point cloud is concerned, we open through a RCS file. Everything will come exactly where it is. And this extraction result assume the point cloud is registered with the control points and things like that. We don't register it. So if every line you're extracting will be as accurate as your point cloud data.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Ramesh. We got through all those questions. I'm going to take over the screen share because I would be remiss if at this point I didn't remind everyone that you can go back to our community page later on and find this recording. And I wanted to just briefly mention our disclaimer before we went any further, that I don't believe Ramesh has mentioned preview features yet, but it's our duty to tell you that we may make statements regarding preview features as well as planned or future development efforts in these sessions, but these statements are not intended to be a promise or guarantee of future delivery. We also assume no obligation to update our forward-looking statements. So just thanks for bearing in on the legal disclaimer. Also, lots of people are asking questions right now. It would be great to keep that coming. So don't forget to ask your questions. We will try to address them all if we have the time. Okay, great. And now, Austin, on to you. I'm making you the presenter. Let's just confirm that we can see your screen.
All right, thank you, Elliot. It should be beaming across to you guys now.
Yep, looks good.
So yeah, I'm the interaction designer on the bridge team working on bridge design in InfraWorks. So here's a quick section around the features that we've added for the 2018.1 release. And then I'll briefly talk about some of the things that are coming up. So we had two main initiatives for 2018.1. I'm going to go through real quickly through the bullet points, and then I'll show you everything in product in a demo. But real quickly, we had the 3D dimensions on all bridge objects, so we added these 3D floating annotations. You can select a bridge object and you'll see them, and you'll be able to view all of the layout dimensions for that specific object. And then the next main thing that we added is in the last release, 2018.0, we added the workflow for being able to add parametric bridge content that's customized or created custom inside of Inventor. So we have all the bridge components now, so piers and girders and all that, and you can create new parts. But we went ahead and added the same functionality for all parametric road decorations. So now we've shipped a couple of parametric road decorations with the 18.1 release, but you can also use the exact same Inventor workflow to create your own custom decorations. So that could be really anything that you want to create. So that could be barriers. It could be, in this example, I've got a box beam guardrail. You could use this to create light poles or street signs or really anything you want. So yeah, it leverages the same exact workflow that we use for bridge components. And I guess without further ado, I'll go ahead and show you everything in InfraWorks. So here I've got my InfraWorks model. Hopefully the lag isn't too bad, but I'll try to kind of move a little slow. So first we'll take a look at the 3D dimensions. So if I zoom out a little bit, I'm just going to select this bridge, and you can see off the bat that you've got an annotation for the start and end stations, as well as one dimension that shows you the overall length of the bridge. If I zoom in, you'll start to see other dimensions appear. And so with the bridge selected, we show the overall length, start and end station, and then the distance between each pier, so each of the span lengths. And this is measured from the center point of the pier to the center point of the adjacent piers. In this example, I've got the abutment offset a little bit from the end of the bridge. So you've got another dimension that shows that abutment offset. Now, so that's with the bridge selected. So as you select the other objects of your bridge, all of the different components, you'll see a different set of dimensions that are being shown.
Hey, Austin, this is Elliot. It looks like you're running into a little bit of a display flicker. This may be just GoToWebinar being troublesome today, but if you're able to minimize your PowerPoint presentation, that may help.
Sure. And I'm just going to share the application instead of sharing my screen. So hopefully that'll help as well.
Cool.
And let me just find the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so hopefully that's better. Sorry about that. I've been replacing or updating drivers and all sorts of things today.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So as you select other objects, you'll see a different set of those layout dimensions. So here I'll click on the pier, and you can see that we have, when the pier is selected, you see the pier height as well as the distance to the next pier, distance to the previous pier, and the distance to the start and end station of the bridge. Then if I go in, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, select a girder group, and here you can just see for girder group we only show the length of the girder group at the center point of the alignment. Most of the other dimensions are more girder specific. So then I'll select a single girder, and here you can see a couple more dimensions. First, if you look at it from top view, we have distance to the center point of the alignment. And then from side view, there's a couple others. We've got one dimension that is the overall length of the girder from start to end, and then another dimension that shows you the distance between the bearings, the center point of the bearings. So in this case, I've got one on the left, this left side, there's only one bearing, so it's reaching all the way to the end of the girder. And then on this right side, it's not a continuous girder, so there's two bearings, and you can see the difference in those dimensions. And so I'll go one more level, and then we can discuss a couple more things. So I'm just going to use this example. If I select one of the cross-section slices, so the girders on this bridge are variable depth steel girders. I'm just using AASHTO type 6 girders for this, and I've changed the section dimensions so that it looks like an I-beam girder and has the right dimensions. And then I've changed the volume, material, and texture so that it shows up in my material calculations as steel. Then to create the variable depth, I've placed a series of cross-sections along the girder and adjusted the parametric attributes of it. Now, when I click on one of those sections, you can see there's now these in-canvas dimensions in addition to the mini toolbar. So then this is kind of hinting at the next stage for these in-canvas dimensions. So the mini toolbar allows you to change all of these values, all these placement dimensions, and add in new ones and delete them and so on. But eventually, and there's another team working on this, kind of creating the widgets and all those things. But eventually you'll be able to just interact with these dimensions. So you click on this 40 and change it to 50, and you'll see that cross-section slice update to match. So that's kind of the next stage for making all of these in-canvas 3D dimensions interactive. And that'll open a lot of doors for how you interact with your InfraWorks models. So I think that's it for the 3D dimensions. We'll continue to kind of expand the way that we use them over time and add in more. And so now let's take a quick look at the decorations. So here I just created this little snippet of road just to make it easier for us to look at. But you can see I've got some decoration along it. On the left side, I've got this little parapet concrete piece. This is actually an assembly from that bridge we were just looking at. I just created an assembly and then applied it to this road. So these parapets kind of extend below the ground. So you've got on the left side a box beam guardrail with 3 rails. And then on the right side, you've got a box beam guardrail with only 2. And you can see this parapet on the right side is a little taller than the one on the left, and then we've got this barrier in the middle. So these are all the new parametric decorations that we've added, and both of these, the guardrails, are actually the same inventor model. So if I select it, I can see that in addition to the normal things that you would see with decorations, so this geometry section, you've also got a rail, post, and plate panel, which these are all of the parametric dimensions that you can actually flex in the model, and these are all defined by that inventor model. So I'm just going to make some quick edits so that we can look at it. So I'll just make this have 3 rails. I'm going to change the spacing to 6 inches between each of those rails. Then I'll change the thickness so it's a little bit wider. I'll make it 6 inches as well. And then I'll change the height of this post to, say, 3.2. And then I hit enter. So you can see also that this has a delayed update mechanism like all of our bridge objects. So you edit multiple values, hit enter, and it changes. Now, I didn't do the best job with those edits, but you can see that I can really create a wide variety of different configurations using this one parametric model. So just because it'll drive me crazy if I don't, I'm going to change this space to add a little more space in between there. So that's looking a little better. So you can see that it's kind of starting to match this one that I have on the other side. And if I look in Style Palette, so these parametric decorations are added to the Parametric Models tab. All of your 3D models and typical decorations are going to be inside the 3D Models tab, and that's where your static models are that are created in 3ds Max or Maya, exported as FBXs, brought into InfraWorks. So the Parametric Models tab contains all of those parametric models. Like we previously had only this bridge folder that contains all of our bridge objects. So if I look in here, I can drill down to piers, and I can select the enhanced standard pier, and I can see it in here. It's got all of the part sizes. There's only one, but you can add more, and then my UI appearance tab. So we essentially just are using the same area for all of our parametric decorations. And really, this folder structure doesn't matter at all. This is how we are suggesting it and how we want to ship the content that we ship with InfraWorks. But you could create a new folder here, and you could name it after your project, or you can name it after the region that it's in, or really however you want to organize it is up to you. The way that you'll look at it, so if I go into decorations, and I'll just open that box theme guardrail, we have the same exact window, same exact workflow. So the way that you define this as a decoration is using this initial page. You assign the inventor model, and then you'll just set this to city furniture and decoration, and then it'll be recognized by all of your roads and and then you can use it. So if I look at this one, I've got a couple part sizes. I'll just click through them real quick. So we've got one that has 1 beam. This one has 2 beams, and that's the one that was in the model behind it. And then this one has 3 beams, and that's the one that's on this left side. So these 3 different parts are available in your catalog. When you say add a decoration or place a decoration, you'll be able to see those 3 different guardrails. And I can add more, I can delete them. If you bring in your own custom inventor parts, you can do it in the same way. So if, say you wanted to create a streetlight structure, you could create an inventor model, however complex, assign certain parameters to be exposed by InfraWorks, bring it in here, and then you can create different part sizes, like maybe one that has 2 lights for 2 lanes, and then one that has 3 lights to align with 3 lanes. So different things like that. And then quickly to wrap this up, I'll just click through a couple of these other parts. So we also added this this barrier that's fully flexible. This version is based on the New Hampshire DOT spec, but then I've also created a couple different variations that just have a different visual style. So using that same part, I'm able to make these adjustments and create a drastically different barrier. And here's the other one that's just got a slight taper to it, but pretty boxy. And yeah, so I think that's it for that. I'm just going to bring back PowerPoint, and I'll have to just share this. I'll have to change my screen sharing real quick.
Hey, Austin, can I ask a couple
Sure.
of questions before you get into the next piece of what you're going to present. There's quite a few in the question pane, but I'll pick out a couple that I think might be interesting.
Okay.
One of them is from Tim, and he asks about Fusion 360 and whether or not Fusion 360 could be used for generating these parts.
That's a good question. We're really interested in Fusion 360, and we think it'll make a lot of sense to use that. There's some technical stuff going on here. So Inventor has we actually install Inventor Server with InfraWorks, so we're able to kind of run a headless version of Inventor. So when you make all these changes and you do all this stuff, it's actually like Inventor is kind of calculating some of these things, and then we're projecting it into InfraWorks. And right now, I believe Fusion doesn't have that headless version yet. So once we have that, I think then we can unlock it. But at the moment, I don't think that'll be happening in the near future.
Okay. A couple of other questions. One of them was about the 3D dimensions and whether or not they would, if there were plans to extend or expand the dimensions that are shown, maybe to show the distance between different levels of the bridge, like from the top and bottom of the abutment or girder.
It's definitely in the plans. We're kind of working through all of those things and figuring out how we can show them and how we can get those dimensions. But we do have some stuff coming up to make some improvements to dimensions as well as the parametric content workflows, which I'll talk a little bit about. But yes, there are plans to improve the dimensions. Another thing that we're looking at and exploring is how we can actually, so if we use this pier as an example, this pier in Inventor is created using a series of sketches, and each of those sketches has a bunch of dimensions associated with it that are actually projected and displayed and laid out in Inventor. And we flag those annotations and we say we want to show them in the stack here. But I think we're kind of looking at how we could actually grab those sketches and those sketch dimensions and display those in 3D space as well. So that's just an idea that we're exploring, but I would expect this to evolve over time.
Okay. Is there a way to lock the dimensions to a specific axis?
Is that locking the existing dimensions that you see here? I suppose so.
I think so, because I'm looking at when the question was asked in the panel, and I think it was around that time.
So the dimensions themselves are locked to a vertical axis right here. So if I go to the top view, then they're not moving around or anything. So they are positioned along that vertical axis.
Okay.
There might, I think there are some other ones, like if we look at the girder, then you do have some horizontal dimensions, and we're kind of picking and choosing how we think it would be best to display these. But there might at some point be an option to change it. Not right now, though.
Okay, and one last question. It's about the content that ships with InfraWorks when I'm actually moving on from the bridge dimensions to the 3D parametric models. You showed a couple of barriers that ship. There was a question about whether or not there was a side barrier or a barrier that understood whether or not it was supposed to be on the left or right side of the road.
It doesn't have any logic, but there is a concrete barrier that is one of the edge exterior barriers. Right now, you would just place it on whichever side you want and then rotate it around. So if it was placed on the wrong side of the road or in the wrong direction, you could rotate it. The same way that you can rotate any of your, I can select it. The same way that you would rotate any of your decorations. So here's an example of that, actually. This is the same sort of parapet that I've just rotated this one 180 degrees to match that side of the road.
Perfect. I actually have two. There's a lot of questions, and they're all actually really good ones. Do you know if there are plans to be able to export a barrier like this or the 3D models from InfraWorks to Revit similar to the workflow for bridges today?
Yes. So I guess it's kind of a two-parter. So right now, if you use Send to Revit on a bridge, so just in case anyone isn't familiar, if you click on a bridge, and so you have it selected, you can right-click and say Send to Revit, and that will generate a Revit model for that bridge that matches that bridge exactly. So right now, if you have decorations on that bridge, they'll also be exported to Revit, and you'll be able to, you can add rebar and all those things in Revit. Right now, it only exports what's on the bridge. So there is no option to just take this road and say export to Revit or send to Revit. But that's something that we can look into. And coming up next, or one of the things that we're working on next on the bridge team, is making some improvements to the whole Revit workflow. There's been a lot of work on the Revit side of things, as well as, so we're kind of moving on to kind of phase 2 of Revit interoperability for InfraWorks. And I think I'll talk a little more about that after this as well.
Perfect. I'll let you continue with the next piece of your presentation, but there are still quite a few questions in the Q&A panel, so hopefully you'll be able to stick around and maybe address some of them.
Yeah, sure. And I can stick around afterwards, and I'll start typing in some answers after this. And also feel free to email me at any time. I imagine most of you have or can find my email address. So. All right, so I'm just going to have to set up the presentation again and share a different screen. Just 1 second. Okay, I think this is the right one. So we talked about the 2018.1 release. So if I go to the next slide, we have a couple of things coming up. Like I mentioned, the Send to Revit Phase 2 is probably one of the biggest initiatives, and this is going to be a very impactful initiative as well. So right now, like I said, you use Send to Revit and it creates a Revit model. But that Revit model isn't necessarily linked to your InfraWorks model. So if you make a change, which often needs to happen, you might create your Revit model, get started on rebar detailing, and then the alignment shifts a little bit, or you find that you need to move a pier by 1 meter, or there's all sorts of things that could require a small change that needs to happen to that model. So right now, that you would have to recreate it essentially because it's not linked to it. So phase 2 of Send to Revit will introduce the ability to update an existing Revit model based on changes that happen in InfraWorks. So if I could create that Revit model, spend 3 months doing all the rebar detailing, and then need to move that pier, so I could go back into InfraWorks, move the pier, update the Revit model, and then it'll preserve as much as possible of that rebar detailing and all that previous work. So I think that'll be the next major thing for Revit. We're also working on displaying the dynamic properties of your InfraWorks model objects in Revit as well, so that you would have all those dynamic parameters and things like that. The next major thing that we're working on now is we're kind of taking a step back and going through all of our current workflows, and we have a long list of improvements and different things that we want to support. So we have a lot of workflow improvements to bridge design and the parametric content workflows. And I've talked to several of you about some of these things already, so you might see some of those discussions coming back. But just to go through the bullets, we are working to support inventor assemblies as well as parts, and have those assemblies be able to accurately calculate volumes. So if you have an assembly that has steel and concrete, it'll calculate volumes for those. We're doing a lot of improvements to the parametric content interface. You can see a couple examples over there on the right. They're just kind of mock-ups and screenshots, but we have a lot of smaller improvements there. Also making some improvements to the part-shaped utility inventor plugin. Introducing steel tub girder sections, making some improvements to how bridge templates work in InfraWorks and making sure that we capture custom content with those templates. And then there's also various other UI and workflow improvements that we'll be taking a look at. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. I'll start answering questions, and Sarah, if you want to take over, then I'll pass it over to you.
Perfect. And I'll just make sure that my screen displays properly before I start talking. You should see a slide that says, what's new in InfraWorks? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cunningham. I'm part of the product management team for InfraWorks. And first, I wanted to say thank you to both Ramesh and Austin for joining today to talk about the functionality related to reality capture and linear feature extraction, as well as bridge design and 3D parametric models. They've both had so much input and say in the direction of how those features develop and their implementation that they're really the best people to present those features because they're so close to them. But there's a number of other people on the product management team that aren't here today, and I'm here to talk about a lot of the features that they worked on that are also in the latest release of InfraWorks. So the first thing I want to talk about builds on what Austin was presenting in terms of 3D parametric models and using Inventor to create them and then being able to bring them into an InfraWorks environment. Related to that is something we have that's called the Infrastructure Parts Editor. And what this allows you to do is it's really to support drainage design workflows, not just in InfraWorks, but also in Civil 3D. And right here, this screenshot shows how it's accessed within InfraWorks. And what it lets you do is create custom content that you'd use for drainage design, so inlets, manholes, and so on and so forth. And what's nice is that exactly the same content you create for InfraWorks can also be used in Civil 3D. So in theory, you create content once, and you can use either product. And this is a quick video that shows a little bit about how it works. So in this case, it's an inlet that's in an InfraWorks model, and what this video will show, it's a little bit quick, is what that inlet looks like in the parts editor when you launch it from the InfraWorks environment. And it's also showing you a number of other structures that are in there that have been created with this parts editor that you can create in Inventor. You can make them as complicated or as simple as you want. You can add whatever dimensions you need, and then bring them into your InfraWorks model. There are a number of components that are pre-configured and that will ship with the software, but that's just to give you a sense of what the tool can do and give you a place to start if you've never done it before. You'll see that same infrastructure parts editor both in an upcoming release of Civil 3D or an upcoming update to Civil 3D, as well as the pending release of InfraWorks. So it'll be in both tools. When we talk about updates to InfraWorks, I often put them into two categories, or four categories. I usually talk about the design and engineering experience, which is what you're seeing here. I talk about modeling, like the idea of creating new drainage parts or the kinds of functionality that Ramesh and Austin talked about. We also talk about things related to the platform, so things that we do to improve the foundation of InfraWorks as a building information modeling tool or an engineering design tool. And we talk about connected workflows, so supporting workflows that allow data to go back and forth between products. Most of the highlights for this update that's coming out soon relate to the design and engineering experience as well as modeling. And this video is showing some of the road modeling enhancements. And there are really two. One of them is around some experience improvements, that's what I would describe them as, for laying out spiral curves on roads. They've made some changes that allow you to edit some of that geometry on the roadway center line in Canvas by dragging grips around. The other thing they've done is they've made it a little bit clearer and easier to edit the different dimensions of the spiral coming into and out of the curve, along with warnings that let you know if your edits violate the road standards that are currently being used. The second update to road modeling relates to quantities. Now, we talked a lot about quantities in the April release. We talked really about two things. We had, in that release, we had earthwork quantities for a single road and material quantities for a single road. And you could select a single road and you could see the earthwork, which is calculated by average end area, or you could see the material quantities for most of the components. We've updated that with this release to be a little more flexible in terms of what quantities you see when something is selected. So now you can select not just one road, but multiple roads and see the combined quantities and materials for the entire selection set. You could select a road and just choose to see the quantities within a given station range for that road. Or you could draw an area that encompasses one road or many roads, and you can see the quantities of the roadways that are within a given area. So if you had, say for example, you were breaking up a road by construction phase or contract, and you wanted to see quantities for a specific area, and you didn't necessarily want to type in the station range every time, you just wanted to do it by area, you could do that as well. And that was the second piece of this particular video. We've made a couple of other enhancements that I categorize as things related to the design and engineering experience. One of them Austin already talked about. He talked about the 3D dimensions on bridges that appear when you've selected the bridge components. A second thing that we've added are prefixes to some of the roadway station labels to clarify what the labels are. So for example, you'll see a prefix of BC for beginning of curve or EC for end of curve at the beginning and end of a circular curve on a roadway alignment. And you'll also see key points along a spiral, like where the tangent begins and ends, where the spiral curve begins and ends. You'll see those prefixes too, so that they stand out and they're a little bit distinct from the station labels that are shown at, I think, every 50 or 100 meters. So a couple of little things just to make the data that we're showing when something is selected a little bit clearer. So in addition to that, we've also added a broader control that lets you determine whether or not you actually see those dimension lines, whether it's on a bridge or a road or anything else, when they're selected. One of the things we released, I think a couple releases back now, was the view settings. So you could have this view setting, and you could have as many as you wanted in a model. And you have the ability to set some parameters for those view settings, like how saturated the model is, how it represents trees, so on and so forth. And the idea is that you might have a different view with a lot of detail that you're using during the design phase, but you might have a view that looks a lot different if you're using that view for presentation purposes. And some of the feedback we got is that for presentation purposes, you may not want to see all of those dimensions when you select something like the bridge or the road. You don't want to see the station labels, or you don't want to see the length of the girder and things like that in a presentation setting where you're really just trying to show the visualization. So now there's a setting that lets you turn those in-canvas annotations or labels on and off. It's in the view settings panel. And you can set that and save it per view. So some views you may turn them on, some views you may turn them off. And most importantly, I'll wrap up by talking a little bit more about what's next. So Austin addressed some of that. He talked about updating the send to Revit functionality along with some other stuff. And the development teams here are really focused on looking at a few things. One of them will be around refining the linear feature extraction workflows that Ramesh talked about today. That will be under refinement for a while. There's also some work going on around additional road modeling capabilities. A lot of the feedback we've gotten from customers like you so far is that what InfraWorks has is good, but it needs more. It needs more detail, or needs to be able to accommodate more detail. So we're looking at a number of initiatives related to the platform, the foundation of InfraWorks to support that, as well as things that you would see, say, that would change the way or give you more flexibility in the roadway modeling tools to design something more complex, say roads with sublayers, or more complex horizontal geometry, or more complex relationships between things like lanes and baselines, and so on and so forth. Lane markings is something that's also on the team's roadmap. I bring that up because lane markings tends to come up a lot, so I want people to know that it's something that teams are looking at. We're also looking at improving the connected workflows, and one of the things that we're looking at is how to store an InfraWorks model in something like the BIM 360 environment. For those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with BIM 360, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. It's an environment where you can put all of your project data. So you might have Word documents and PDFs and images and notes and meeting minutes and Revit models and InfraWorks models and AutoCAD drawings, a whole bunch of stuff. And you can put it and store it and manage it in this environment that can be accessed basically through any web browser. You can also do things like manage permissions to things so that people have access to only the data that they need. So we're looking at ways to store models in that environment. And one of the things that that will allow us to do is probably enhance and improve the functionality that's in the current web and mobile viewer. And we're really excited about some of the things that we're working on in that area. And then back to modeling, there are some improvements that we're looking at around grading. And one of those things will be related to how you design terracing or benching and eventually ditching alongside a road. So we're beginning to look at ways where we can do that in a pretty detailed fashion. And that wraps up the quick overview that I wanted to give you on some of the other remaining features. And I think we can wrap up today's webcast. I think we're going to leave the webcast open for a few more minutes to give us some time to answer questions, because I still haven't seen any of the questions that have been asked while I've been talking. But while I do that, I'll leave this slide up on the screen, because our next webcast, as we mentioned in the beginning, is on Wednesday, July 12th. That's in a couple of weeks. And Ramesh will be back to go through the feature extraction workflows from reality capture data in InfraWorks in much more detail. So if that was something that you were interested in, you want to know more about how it works, I think this would be a great webcast to check. And with that, and on behalf of Elliot and Ramesh and Austin, thank you so much for attending today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.